Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be having a look at this album. It's by Tears for Fears and it is called The Seeds of Love. Now this review was requested by my very good friend Vinyl Collector James. As always, I would urge you all to go over and check out his fantastic YouTube channel. But anyway, here today I will just be looking at this album. I will give a bit of background information about it, then I will show you a vinyl copy and then go over each of the album's tracks in detail. So this was the duo's third album, released on the 25th of September in 1989. Reportedly it cost over £1 million to make this album, and took about 3 years off their time making this album. The sessions for this started way back in 1986 with two producers called Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley. However, the two members of Tears for Fears, Roland Orzabal, I think that's how you say his name, and Kurt Smith were unhappy with the results of those sessions, and they were scrapped in early 1987. So they reunited with producer Chris Hughes, who had produced the last two albums, but Orzabal wanted to move away from using synthesizers, which had dominated the band's last two albums, and was looking to develop more natural sounds. This difference in approach led to Hughes leaving the sessions in 1987, and in the end the band decided to produce the album by themselves with help from a guy called David Bascombe, who engineered and co-produced the album. It was also a difficult album to make personally for the band, and the pair soon fell out after making this. Roland became very obsessed with the record, really wanted to get it right, sound perfect in his eyes, whereas Kurt Smith was getting more distracted by living the rock star lifestyle, but he was also having his own personal troubles as well, the breakup of his first marriage as well. So he really wasn't too much involved with this album as much as he had been with the first two Tears for Fears albums. However, all this paid off because the album was a hit, entering the UK charts at #1 and going platinum within 3 weeks of release. It was also a hit in the US, so only reaching #8, but it would also go platinum as well. So a very, very successful album here. So I'm now just going to show you my vinyl copy of it here. And this is just a book standard copy, I think a original one from back in 1989. There's a cover. I really like the cover, really interesting, really vivid colours, love it a lot. And there's the back of the record there, pretty plain black, but I'm dropping it here, but yeah, I love that cover. It comes with a custom inner sleeve. Unfortunately, my album wasn't in the greatest of shape. You see there, it's kind of torn there a bit. Not too happy about that, but it doesn't really matter. You just sort of get lyrics and little illustrations and whatnot. And then the record itself looks like this. We are on a Blue Fontana Records label. I believe that this label was around in the 1960s, and it was reintroduced during the late 80s, this Fontana Records here. So that's the record there got over. So I'm now going to go over each of the album songs. There are 8 tracks in total here, and I will give each song a score out of 10, and then those scores will be used to give us a overall percentage marking for the album.
Well, it's a world gone crazy.
So the opening track is a song called Woman in Chains, which I am giving a 7 out of 10 to. This is quite a slow start, but it develops as the song goes on. Lyrics on this one are about women's rights and whatnot, and a duet with a female singer called Oleta Adams, who features very, very heavily on this album, playing that piano on most songs, but also singing on a lot of the tracks as well. She has a really nice voice. The session band also featured Phil Collins playing drums and Pino Palladino on bass, very famous bass player. The thing with this song, the production, it is maybe slightly dated. You can very much date this as a late 80s song, but it was a good track though. The second single from the album reached number 26 in the UK and number 36 in the US. So not a great performance there from the single, but it's still a good song, although nothing amazing for me personally. It maybe drags on a tad, this song.
I was shining a blinding light.
Second track up on the album is called Bad Man's Song, which I am giving a 5 out of 10 to. This, I would say, is the weakest track like on the album. It's very long song, about like 8 minutes 32 seconds or something ridiculous like that. Starts off with this kind of sort of jazzy piano, but then like it changes for like the verse, but then the song it just doesn't go anywhere for me. It really drags on, really grates this song here. This was one of the first songs written for the album, written during the 1985 world tour with keyboardist Nicky Holland, who would also co-write most of the album's songs, written after Roland heard 2 of like the tour personnel saying nasty things about them. The track went through many different like incarnations before like arriving at like this final version. Like apparently the original demo version is like a million miles away from like what like this like studio version is like. You know, it just gets very boring, this song, very quickly. Yeah, like 8 minutes 32 seconds. Like if like it was a much shorter song, then it probably would get a lot higher score. And like also like it's kind of got like these sort of gospel vocals in it, and that not really my thing personally, not really like my favourite sort of style of music. So yeah, that would be Bad Man's Song, a 5 out of 10. Then we get sort of like the title song, Sowing the Seeds of Love, which is undoubtedly a classic not song. I am giving it a 9 out of 10, possibly Tears for Fears' most popular song. Very Beatlesque, like in style, like shall I say, very like I Am at the Walrus type strings and like sort of like piano sounds and that. Like I really like the verses of this one, really like the stages like it goes through. Like again, like this is like a 6 minute plus track, but for me this is one what just doesn't drag. Like it goes through like a lot of different stages, and like it's always interesting, this track for me. The reason why like it isn't like a 10 for me personally is because the chorus, it is like a little bit repetitive, a little bit cheesy, but I get it, like it is supposed to be quite like anthematic, sort of like a sing-along thing, sort of like similar to All You Need Is Love, but other than that, like it isn't like one of like my favourite Beatles songs for like the same reason as this track. Something else worth noting is that there is like a little dig at like Paul Weller in like the lyrics to this one. I think it goes kick out the style, bring back the jam. Sort of like a little like mocking there off like the Style Council, but I do like the song though. It was a worldwide hit, charted in like 17 countries, hit number 5 in like the UK, number 2 in like the US charts. So yeah, really great song here, Sowing the Seeds of Love. Now, closing side one, we have a track called Advice for the Young at Heart, which I'm giving a 6 out of 10 to. This is a decent enough song, sung by Kurt Smith, like the only song what he sings the lead vocals on. However, for me, it is just very flat, very boring, like as like a song for me. Very sort of softly sung, but he isn't really putting in like 100% with this song. He's sort of like, it lacks like a lot of passion, like the vocals on this one. Whereas Roland, on like his songs, what he sings, he puts in like a lot of power, a lot of passion in like his vocal performances. This song is also a little bit shorter than most of the cuts on this album, what makes it like a little bit more like tolerable. And this would also be, I think, the 3rd single released from the album, reached number 36 in like the UK. So yeah, like not a great place for it there, not really all that much like off a song personally, like a little bit like kind of like falls flat for me, this track. But it isn't a bad song though, just not really interesting or like entertaining for me personally. The second side of the album opens up with a song called Standing on the Corner of the Third World, which I'm giving a 7 out of 10 to. This is quite a soft, sort of like easy listening song. Kind of reminds me a little bit, now like you might not get like this comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of like Paul Simon's Rhythm of the Saints album, what would come I think like a year after this, sort of like quite like sort of Brazilian sounding sort of like rhythms and that. Quite soft, quite sort of like easy listening, sort of chill out music. I quite like this one a lot, like sort of like the style of it. But it's just the actual song, like it's far too long, sort of about like 5 minutes plus. Very hard to keep like me interested with this song. It doesn't really change, doesn't develop, just a little bit boring, but I do like the rhythm of it. Like I do like the sort of like Latin flavour of it. and like the whole sort of like atmosphere of the track. So for that, I would give it a 7 out of 10. The track on the album is called Swords and Knives, which I do really enjoy this song, giving it an 8 out of 10, one of the better cuts on the album. Again, it starts off quite slow, but then like the rhythm kicks in, and like I really enjoy it. A little bit sort of darker, like musically, sort of like similar to like The Hurt in like many ways, sort of like this sort of very atmospheric track created by like the use of like synthesized strings. Again, it goes through a lot of different sections with this one, so it is very long song, 6 minutes 20 seconds to be precise. It is certainly worth like that running time, and like some really great guitar work like towards the end of the song. So yeah, that would be Swords and Knives, getting a 8 out of 10 for me. Another song now about knives is called The Year of the Knife, which I'm giving a 6 out of 10 to. Not a massive fan of this track, it has to be said. Starts off with like this sort of like audience applause, which sort of like gives like the illusion of like a live performance. Like I think, like I'm not too sure like why like the applause is there during like the intro of the song, but this is a bit more sprightly, a little bit more fun musically from like the rest of the album, a little bit more of like a rocking number this, but this one suffers greatly from like very dated production and like guitar sound. It's got a very sort of typical kind of like late 80s rock guitar sound, and like these really kind of grating backing vocals as well. Sounds a lot like sort of like Pink Floyd stuff, sort of like from this time, like Momentary Lapse of Reason and like Division Bell and that. However, this isn't quite as good as like any of like the stuff like on like those albums. Well, maybe better than some of like the stuff on like Momentary Lapse of Reason, like has to be said, but it is done in like that very kind of generic rock style, which I personally don't care for. But the actual playing on this song is great. Roland puts in some great guitar work, like he is like really underrated like as like a guitarist, but again it is far too long, like over 7 minutes this track, and yet it just isn't worth that running time. Far too long for me. Would be The Year of the Knife with a 6 out of 10. Now we're at the closing track, which is called Famous Last Words, which I really like actually. A massive contrast from like the last song. It's just very bare, just Roland and like a piano singing, but then like a gorgeous string arrangement comes in towards like the middle, and it is just brilliant. A real suitable closer for the album, very effective, and like yeah, like a really beautiful, really touching song. So I really like that song. Like the album does redeem itself like by the end with Famous Last Words. Overall, I would give the album a score of 71%. So I'll start off with like the good things. Firstly, I would say the vocals on this album by both like Roland and like the female singer Oleta Adams, her name is. They show a lot of emotion and like a lot of power, which I do really enjoy. It is only Kurt Smith's vocals on like Advice for the Young at Heart will kind of like fall flat for me personally. Also a very eccentric album like in styles, going from stuff like gospel and jazz to more sort of like rock sounds, and then sort of classic 60s like Beatle Pache. Like it really is a varied album, but it is maybe a little bit like too eccentric like for like its own good. Like maybe like some of like these music like pretentious maybe drag it down like a little bit for me personally, like in terms of like the overall quality of the album. If anything, like I was maybe like a little bit disappointed going into this for like the first time hearing the album, because going by like the cover and like the only song I knew, The Seeds of Love, like I was expecting quite like a Beatlesque sort of like 60s psychedelic throwback album, which is a sound what I love. Whereas I got like a slightly sort of like more sort of like muddled up album with sort of like different styles and that going on. So maybe like it was like me sort of like not knowing like what to expect like from the album, or falsely assuming that like stuff like the lead single like Seeds of Love would be the type of material like across like the whole album. I think the other thing is it is just a kind of like lack of material on this album. There are only 8 songs on the album, and like considering in that it was like a good 4 years since like the last one, Songs from the Big Chair. Yeah, 8 songs in 4 years, really, is that enough for Tears for Fears? I mean, like, most bands this year were putting out albums, if not like every year, like at least like every 2 years, like they were coming out with albums, and like I bet that like they would have like a damn sight more than 8 tracks. Sense as well that they were maybe like under pressure, like as well, to follow up like the huge success of Songs from the Big Chair. So like they or like rather Roland put us all into this album, really working on it, really making it as like good like as it could be, like and like in like his eyes. However, some of the songs sound so overworked and so like overproduced, it kind of drains all life out of them, like in like some ways, and like it comes like to like the point where like sort of like they sound empty and bland to my ears. So yeah, a little bit of like a mixed bag here, but there are still some cracking songs. So I mean, like Sowing the Seeds of Love is a great song. What was the other one? Swords and Knives and like Famous Last Words would be my picks from this album. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this review, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.
We will sing when the